A helpless mother bobcat lay tied to the cold steel rails of an abandoned train track, her three tiny cubs trembling beside her. The distant whistle of an approaching train grew louder, a harbinger of disaster. As time rapidly ran out, her thin, emaciated body quivered with exhaustion, and her amber eyes darted around in frantic search of salvation. The cubs huddled close to her, their soft, high-pitched cries barely audible over the growing hum of the rails. The mother strained against the rough ropes binding her, letting out a mournful wail that echoed through the otherwise quiet expanse of forest surrounding the tracks. In the distance, the faint sound of a car broke the stillness. Driving along the narrow, winding road that cut through the woods, Ethan Hayes tapped the steering wheel lightly to the rhythm of a hymn playing on the radio. The 44-year-old mechanic was on his way to his shop in Ridgewood, a small town nestled at the edge of the forest. His dusty old pickup truck, cluttered with tools and spare parts, rattled slightly as it hit a pothole. Ethan's mind wandered as he drove, lingering on thoughts of his son, Noah. After his wife's passing 3 years ago, Ethan had struggled to balance work and parenting. Noah, now 16, had grown distant, spending more time with friends than at home. The quiet tension between them weighed heavily on Ethan, who whispered a quiet prayer under his breath. "Lord, show me a way to reach him." His prayer was interrupted by an unusual sound, a faint, high-pitched wail carried on the wind. Frowning, Ethan slowed the truck and rolled down the window. The sound grew sharper, tugging at his heart. As he rounded a bend in the road, his eyes locked onto a horrifying sight. There on the tracks lay the bobcat and her cubs. The mother's frantic struggles grew more desperate as the vibrations of the rails intensified, signaling the train's imminent arrival. Without hesitation, Ethan slammed on the brakes, bringing his truck to a screeching halt. He leaped out, his boots crunching on the gravel as he sprinted toward the tracks. The train was visible now, a hulking mass of steel hurtling toward the helpless animals. Dropping to his knees beside the mother bobcat, Ethan's hands moved frantically to untie the thick knots. The ropes were coarse and weathered, biting into his palms as he worked against the clock. "Hang on, girl," he murmured, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. The mother bobcat's wild eyes met his, a mixture of fear and hope flickering within them. Her cubs clung to her, their tiny paws pressing into the dirt. The train's whistle blared again, louder and deafening. Ethan glanced over his shoulder. The train was only seconds away. With a final desperate tug, the knot gave way and the rope fell loose. Scooping up the three cubs in his arms, Ethan called to the mother, "Come on, girl." She hesitated briefly, her legs trembling, but then staggered after him as he bolted from the tracks. They dove into the brush just as the train thundered past, a gust of wind and noise washing over them. Ethan lay sprawled on the ground, his chest heaving as he clutched the cubs. The mother bobcat collapsed beside him, letting out a low, guttural sound, a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude. He stroked her head gently, murmuring, "You're safe now." As the train faded into the distance, Ethan stood cradling the cubs. The mother bobcat struggled to her feet and followed him to his truck. He gently placed the cubs in a box he kept in the back for tools and helped the mother climb in. Turning toward Ridgewood, he drove cautiously, his mind racing with questions. Who could have done such a thing, and why? When Ethan pulled into his driveway, his modest home, with its peeling paint and overgrown lawn, stood in stark contrast to the remarkable animals now under his care. He carried the cubs into the garage, setting them on a pile of old blankets while the mother bobcat curled protectively around them. Returning to the kitchen, Ethan called out, "Noah, get down here!" Noah appeared in the doorway, his earbuds dangling from his neck and an annoyed expression on his face. "What's up, Dad?" Ethan gestured toward the garage. "Come see this." Curiosity replaced Noah's irritation as he followed his father. When his eyes fell on the bobcat and her cubs, his jaw dropped. Where did they come from?" "Found them tied to the tracks," Ethan said, his voice tight. "Barely saved them in time." Noah's face darkened. "That's messed up. Who would do that?" I don't know, Ethan replied, but they're here now and we need to take care of them. Over the next few days, Ethan and Noah worked together to nurse the Bobcat family back to health. Ethan cleaned the mother's wounds while Noah prepared food and made a makeshift pen in the backyard. The process wasn't easy. The Bobcats were wary and skittish, but slowly they began to trust their human caretakers. One afternoon, while Ethan was fixing the pen, his neighbor, Mr. Walker, leaned over the fence. "Ethan," he called, "I heard about some kids messing around by the tracks last week. Something about tying up animals. Any chance it's connected?" Ethan's heart sank. "Do you know who?" Walker hesitated. "Heard some names. Carter, Lucas, maybe Noah." Ethan's blood ran cold. That night, as he sat across the table from his son, he asked, "Noah, were you and your friends involved in what happened to those Bobcats?" Noah froze, guilt flashing across his face. "Dad, we didn't mean for it to go that far. We thought it was just a joke." "A joke?" Ethan's voice rose. "You tied a helpless animal to train tracks?" Noah looked away, his shoulders slumping. "It wasn't just me. Carter said they'd just run away." Ethan took a deep breath, reining in his anger. "Son, this isn't about blame. It's about responsibility. You're going to help me take care of them, and you're going to make this right." Over the following weeks, Noah and his friends, Carter and Lucas, became integral to the Bobcats' care. At first, the boys were reluctant, their interactions awkward and guarded. But as they spent time feeding, cleaning, and playing with the cubs, something began to shift. Carter, initially brash and dismissive, discovered a knack for building toys that the cubs loved to pounce on. Lucas, quiet and reserved, formed a special bond with the smallest cub, often sitting silently beside it, stroking its fur. Noah, working closely with his father, began to see the depth of his mistake and the importance of compassion. One evening, as the group sat in the backyard watching the cubs play, Ethan addressed them. "You boys have done good work, but this isn't just about these Bobcats. It's about learning to care, to think beyond yourselves." The boys nodded, their expressions serious. Over time, the lessons they learned from caring for the Bobcats seeped into other aspects of their lives. Their friendships grew stronger, and their respect for Ethan deepened. The day came when the cubs were strong enough to be released into the wild. The boys joined Ethan and Noah as they carried the Bobcat family to a protected reserve on the edge of the forest. As the mother Bobcat disappeared into the trees, her cubs trailing behind her, Ethan placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. "Sometimes we don't see the impact of our actions right away, but today we've made things right." Noah nodded, his gaze following the Bobcats until they vanished from sight. "Thanks, Dad, for everything." As they drove home, the weight that had hung over their relationship seemed lighter. In the quiet moments that followed, father and son found a renewed bond built not just on words, but on the lessons they had shared. Back in Ridgewood, the boys carried the memory of the Bobcats with them. Their time spent with the animals had transformed them, teaching them empathy and responsibility. For Ethan, the experience had not only saved the Bobcats but also helped heal the rift between him and his son, reminding them both of the power of second chances.